Welcome to episode 8 of The Wolf Condition. Last time we talked about instinct as early pattern recognition, the signal that arrives before you can explain it. Today we're looking at what happens after that signal shows up. And here's the thing most people won't tell you: we don't ignore instinct because we don't hear it, we ignore it because listening to it is inconvenient. And inconvenience, apparently, is reason enough to lie to ourselves for months or years at a time. And here's how it usually goes: something feels off. You can't name it yet, but your body registers it. A hire that looks perfect on paper, but something in the interview felt rehearsed. A relationship where words say one thing, but the relationship energy just says another. A situation where everyone else seems fine, but you feel like you're performing just to keep up. And because you can't explain it, there's no evidence, no violation, no dramatic moment. You tell yourself you're overthinking it. But here's what's actually happening: you're not overthinking it, you're thinking accurately and then spending all your energy trying to convince yourself that you're wrong. I've spent years in workplace investigations, and one pattern showed up over and over. By the time someone filed a formal complaint, at least five other people had already noticed the problem. They just didn't say anything because the person was likable, senior, going through something, or this is just the way things are. Sometimes things just didn't seem bad enough to justify making a fuss, and other times it just felt like they couldn't prove it. So they waited, and while they waited, the problem got worse. And by the time it got undeniable, it had cost the organization months of productivity, morale, and trust. The same thing can happen in relationships. You notice something in someone 2 months in, how they never ask about your day, or how you're always the one initiating plans, or that you felt relieved when they cancel. You tell yourself they're busy or stressed or not a texter. You give them the benefit of the doubt. You perform generosity while your body quietly keeps score. And 6 months later, you realize you were doing all the work, and the only person who didn't know was you because you spent that entire time talking yourself out of what you already knew. Let's talk about the specific lies that we tell ourselves because they're predictable. I've heard them all and I have used most of them. Maybe I'm just anxious. This one's convenient because it pathologizes your instinct. If you're anxious, then that means your perception isn't reliable. Problem solved. Except instinct doesn't feel like anxiety. Anxiety escalates, it loops, it demands reassurance. Instinct doesn't escalate, it just stays there, quiet, consistent, like a post it note that you keep trying to ignore. I don't want to be judgmental. This is where people confuse discernment with judgment. Judgment is rigid, it's moralistic. Discernment is observation. Noticing that someone's words don't match their behavior doesn't mean it's not judgmental, it's just accurate. We've been socialized to think that having boundaries or standards makes us difficult, so we override what we see in favor of what we're supposed to believe. Everyone seems fine with this. So what? Everyone else isn't you. Everyone else isn't managing your nervous system or living your life. Consensus doesn't validate reality. Sometimes the group is wrong. Sometimes the group is conflict avoidant. Sometimes the group just hasn't been paying attention. And here's the uncomfortable truth: outsourcing your reality to other people is how you end up in situations that don't serve you. I need more proof. Proof of what? That your instinct is correct? That you're allowed to have a reaction? That or something's wrong enough to justify your discomfort? This happens a lot at work or professional settings. People wait for documentation, for patterns, for something actionable. And I get it. I've operated in that world. But by the time you actually have proof, the damage is most often already done. Instinct isn't about proof, it's about direction, it's about where to look, what to monitor. It's about the feeling of what to start paying closer attention to. Maybe I'm overreacting. This one is the most insidious one because it frames your perception as the problem, not the situation, not the behavior, your sensitivity, your expectations, your inability to just go with the flow. But here's what I've learned: the people that accuse themselves of overreacting are almost never overreacting. They're usually underreacting and then shaming themselves for noticing anything at all. So, what happens when you spend months or years talking yourself out of what you already know? You don't just ignore the signal, you train yourself not to trust your own perception. And that has consequences. You start second guessing every decision. You require external validation before you act. You develop chronic doubt, not because you're indecisive, but because you've conditioned yourself to believe that your internal knowing isn't reliable. And here's the thing: situations that you could have avoided with early attention now require 10 times the energy to exit. The hire that you had a bad feeling about, now they're embedded in your team, and firing them would be a whole ordeal. The relationship that fell off in month 2, well, now you're 18 months in, and leaving now would feel like a failure. I'm not saying that every instinct is correct, but I am saying that if there is this quiet signal that keeps showing up and it's just so persistent that you can't ignore it, I think it's probably worth listening to. Because the question isn't, am I sure? The question is, why am I working so hard to convince myself I'm wrong? Here's what changes when you stop overriding instinct: you stop performing certainty you don't feel. You stop waiting for permission from external sources to act on internal information. You stop treating your own perception as less reliable than consensus or inconvenience. And this doesn't mean you become impulsive. Instinct isn't impulsive. Instinct doesn't demand immediate reaction. It just asks you to pay attention, to stay alert, to stop dismissing early data just because you couldn't explain it. And you know what's wild? In every workplace investigation I've conducted, someone has always said, I knew something was off, but I didn't think it was my place to say anything. I'm here to say it's always your place. It's your nervous system. It's your life. You don't need a whole committee to vote on whether or not to trust what you're registering. An instinct doesn't need you to prove anything. It just needs you to stop spending so much energy talking yourself out of it. In the next episode, we'll look at the specific moment when people finally stop overriding, what shifts, what breaks, and what makes them wish they'd listened sooner. That's coming up next on The Wolf Condition. Thanks for listening.